I wanted to tell you a story about a block of marble. In 1463, the Council of Firenze of Italy commissioned a sculpture to carve a giant statue. They wanted to put it in front of City Hall, and someone on council in that time said, it'd be good if it was a biblical character, someone with strength and, to represent the strength of our city, resiliency, something like that. And so they asked Agostino di Duzio. He was commissioned, and they would say the name just like that every time. And so this guy, he goes to the quarry, this artist, and he marks off a 19-foot piece of white marble. 19 feet, huge. And then he went to cut it. And when he did that, he cut the slab just a little bit too thin. And so when it was removed, it fell. And when it fell, it fractured. It left a fracture down one side of the piece. And so Agostino declared it useless. It's useless. And so he went back to the council. He said, I need a new piece. And they said, no, not that. We already paid for this one. No. And he said, no. And they went back and forth. And finally, he said, no, I can't do it. And so council refused. He wouldn't do it. And they just had this piece of marble. And it sat there for 38 years. And it was an embarrassment every time they would think about it. There's this huge piece of marble we paid for that is just useless. And then in 1501, the council asked the son of a local official, and the family was the Buonarrotis. I'm saying all these names very correctly. And they asked this kid to try again, and they wanted him to try with the broken slab. And so this 26-year-old locked himself in his workshop near the cathedral to chisel and polish, and he spent 3 years doing this. And when it was done, it took 49 men, 5 days, to move the statue from the workshop to where City Hall, where they wanted to put it. And they had to tear down archways. They had a couple narrow streets they had to widen to get this statue through. But when it was done, people came from all over Europe to see the 14-foot statue of David. Firenze's Florence. We might say the stone was redeemed. The giant stone transformed from a fractured waste of rock and embarrassment into this masterpiece by the genius and imagination of Michelangelo. We're also in a redemption story today, the redemption of Judah. We've been in this story called Joseph, and we added Judah on the side. And today really is about redemption. If you've been following with us, we're at the part of this Joseph story where the brothers have returned to Egypt. It's the second time, and they went there this time with their youngest brother Benjamin, and Judah pledged his own life, if you remember that. And they come and they've had the silver returned, and so they're bringing double. And then it turns out in the story last week that the silver was paid. And then magically it ended up back in their bags. And so they are feeling very nervous. Everyone's a bit nervous coming back. And then they're welcomed into Zaphanath's house, his very own house, and to this feast. And after the whole spy debacle where he called them names, you're spies, you're spies, you're spies, he seems pretty nice now. And so maybe they're wondering if Zaphanath is Egyptian for split personality, because he was so mean and now he's so nice. And it's a bit weird because he seems to know the ages of all the brothers. He seats them in order, and then he honors Benjamin with this extra heaping high plate of food. And then, of course, no one but the servants see Zaphanath lose it. He gets very emotional and he weeps uncontrollably in the back room, a little splash, and then he fixes his hat and adjusts his Egyptian jewelry and goes back out to meet the brothers again. No one understands the prime minister's odd fixation with this little Hebrew family. That's where we are in the story. And of course, we know it's Joseph, but they don't. So Zaphanath, Joseph, okay? You with me? I hope so, guys. Okay, here we go. Chapter 44. It's a bit long, but it's such a good story. Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain." And he did as Joseph said. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done.'" When he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, "What? Why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves." "Very well then," he said, "let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame." Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination?" "What can we say to my Lord?" Judah replied. "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who is found to have the cup." But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who is found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in peace." Then Judah went up to him and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, 'Do you have a father or a brother?' And we answered, 'We have an aged father, and there is a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he's the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him.' Then you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me so I can see him for myself.' And we said to my Lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die.' But you told your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes down with me, you will not see my face again.' When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my Lord had said. And then our father said, 'Go back and buy a little more food.' And we said, 'We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go. We cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us.' Your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went out from me, and I said, he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in misery.' So now, if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father." This is God's word. Oh, so good. My big idea is that we've been bought out of slavery to live lives of love. We've been bought out of slavery to live lives of love. There's a few challenges in this passage. And the first one is that you would admit your guilt. I think very often in a crime movie or a crime story, the accused will declare with emphatic fervor, "I am innocent." Or they'll say, I've been framed, right? You've seen this before, right? It's very common. And the concept of being framed comes about when the evidence just seems too good to be true, right? When you're watching and you're like, okay, this is early in the movie and the evidence is all there, like probably they've been framed. That's what we think, right? And we know it's just too obvious. Like we found the gun, the money was in your account, look what I found. And the accused declares, you planted it, I was hacked, I've been framed. And of course, the offense of framing someone is somewhat lessened if we knew the person was guilty though, right? So then you're like, well, they did frame you, but like you were guilty, so I don't know. It's kind of a wash, right? That's kind of what we think sometimes when we're watching. And this is such a dramatic scene, this climactic moment. The special cup has been stolen, and their certainty, the brothers, their indignation, the injustice at this false accusation and the affront, leading them to make this lofty declaration of certain death for the guilty perpetrator. You can imagine as they go bag by bag, starting with the oldest, as they go down, just the certainty growing, right? Like if it's not in Simeon's bag, it's not here, because it would be Simeon. You know, it's not Gad. I mean, Gad's so quiet, we'd never hear from him anyway, right? Like certainly not Benjamin. But humans know this feeling of shock and horror when your stomach drops, that feeling where the blood rushes from your face. Maybe your knees buckle and the blood is pumping. You feel your heart. Maybe you feel sick. Maybe you actually get sick. It's possible in that moment of shock. Verse 13 says that this, they tore their clothes. So much is wrapped up in these few words. They tear their clothes like their father did when his son was torn from him for grief. They tear their clothes like the women of Shechem who lost sons and husbands for anguish. They tear their clothes like maybe did Dinah and Bilhah and Tamar for lost innocence. You tear your clothes when the worst possible thing has happened. That's when you tear your clothes. For the darkness of the world, for all the injustices, for the wrongness of death, for the tearing of your heart, for the irreparable loss. That's why you tear your clothes. But not because you're innocent. In the moment of confrontation, Joseph says to them, he says, don't you know a man like me can find things out by divination? Or he could have said, I know what you did. You don't know how, but I know what you did. You're guilty. And then Judah's response is, what can we say? He says it twice. What can we say? He says, how could we prove our innocence when God has uncovered our guilt? And this is what the test did, isn't it? It uncovered something. Joseph's final test is that under pressure, the question is, will they abandon the favorite brother? That's this test. Will they abandon him? Have they changed? Has 20 years forged a different character in them? And even the steward says, the rest of you will go free. Or the words are, the rest will be acquitted. You can go. You're not guilty. Are you? You can go. They have their silver. They could leave. They're allowed. Only the one with the cup in his bag will be the slave. Ironically, it's Benjamin who's framed, who's the only innocent one out of that group. I told you a few years ago about the last police ticket I had. It was when I worked here. So I've sinned. I'm confessing to you. No. I was driving Gabe, and we were living in Maple Ridge still. We were commuting at that time, so I was driving through Silverdale. We were trying to get to an MEI appointment, and there's a place where the speed limit drops from 80 down to 60, and then it goes back up to 80. And so I was driving at a beautiful 82, 83, which is great in an 80 zone, and we were chatting, and I was not paying attention, and so into the 60 zone at 83. And so sure enough, I got pulled over. And the policeman comes to the car and he says, he says the question, right? Do you know why I pulled you over? And I said, yes, I'm so sorry, I was speeding. And he looked surprised. And then he went back to his car and he came back and he said, I'm giving you the lowest version of this ticket because I just don't have many people respond the way you did, where they admit their guilt. And I was like, oh, well, I was speeding, so, you know. And I think it's funny because every policeman asks that question, don't they? Every policeman who pulls you over, I think it's like the standard question they get in training. They're supposed to ask you, you know, do you know why I pulled you over? Why do you think they ask that? Like every parent knows the answer. It's like you're trying to elicit a confession. Why did I pull you over? Was it because I was texting while I was driving? Was it I didn't have my seatbelt on? Is that why you pulled me over? I was speeding too. Which one is it? Like all of it, right? And that's the good parent technique. Like, do you know why you're in trouble, right? This is the thing. And the question is like, will you admit your guilt? Will you acknowledge it? Will you come to terms? How will you respond? Because we could respond with justification. We could say, well, it was only a little, or the speed changed there. I didn't notice. It wasn't my fault. Or it could be entitlement, where I say, I never speed. This is the one time I ever have sped. I don't deserve this from you. Or it could be denial. You misread the speed gun. You were probably getting the guy next to me. He was going faster than me. I wasn't speeding. I'm not guilty. See, the final test is to uncover your heart. The condition of your heart. Are you ready to admit what you've done and what you bring, to expend your justifications and entitlements and denials, and to come in confession and be free? What can I say? God has uncovered my guilt. And the second challenge is that we would learn to love. There's this weird little story that happens early in the Bible, and it's about this random Jewish family. It's like a strange little story when if you find it, you come upon it. It's this random little family, Jewish family, left Israel and they went to Moab because there's a famine. And so the father has some sons, and the sons end up marrying Moabite women, and that's like really frowned upon. They weren't in good relationship, and so this was like not a good thing. But they're there living there, and then the story turns to tragedy. So all of the men in the family die. The husband dies, each of the sons die, and the mother's just left on her own. And so she decides finally she's going to go back to Israel, and she brings nothing with her. Just this one Moabite widow from one of her sons decides she wants to go back with her. She says, I'm coming back with you. There's nothing for me here. Just take me with you. And so the two of them go back to Israel. Now, when she gets back, her name's Naomi, she can't buy back their family land because she's poor. She has no money. She's a widow. She's a woman. In every way, she's stuck. She can't even marry off her daughter-in-law because she's a Moabite. Who's going to want her? Right? And so she's in a lot of trouble. She's really trapped. In fact, she changes her name to Bitter. She says, just call me Bitter from now on. That'll be my name. And then the story changes. It takes a turn when this rich guy, Boaz, he falls for the Moabite girl. And so the Moabite girl, she helps things along, bats her eyes and stuff and sleeps at the end of the bed, and there's a whole story there. Eventually, though, this guy Boaz, he becomes what's called a kinsman redeemer. And a kinsman redeemer is described this way. It's a male relative legally responsible for acting on behalf of a vulnerable family member in ancient Israel. Duties would include buying back lost family property, rescuing relatives from slavery, and marrying a childless widow to preserve the family line. So this is the story. When you get to the very end of the story, the whole time you're like, what has happened? This is in the Bible, this weird romance? You get to the very end, the very last few verses of Ruth chapter 4, verse 18 says this. And this is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, that's the guy, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. Boom. Mic drop. It just stops. It doesn't say anything more. It's so good. Now, Perez, if you remember, is Judah's son. Judah from our story. Judah, the son of Tamar. Judah had sex with his own daughter-in-law when he thought she was a prostitute. If you weren't here for that story, you really should go back and listen to that sermon. Now, there's this Moabite gold digger in the family line. Like a story certain to be filled with shame if it wasn't for all this grace. My question is, why is Judah even talking in our story? Judah breaks into the longest speech in the book of Genesis, but my question is, why is he talking at all? Because Reuben is the older brother. Reuben is the family leader, isn't he? He should be the spokesman, shouldn't he? And if Reuben he's got a sore throat and he can't talk, then there's Simeon. He's next in line. He should take up the spot. And if Simeon had a problem, it would be Levi. Judah's he's way down the line. Why is he talking? 1 Chronicles 5:2 says, Judah became strong among his brothers is their description later after the fact. But he's become this leader. He's become the spokesman of his brothers. He's been transformed from the runaway to the spokesman. And in the kingdom, this is how it works. The blessing isn't yours by right, not birthright or circumcision or nationality. But instead, there's stories about twins and scandal and women and foreigners and sin and grace and heart change. It's wild. And Judah has learned to love. That's what happens to Judah. I'll admit to you that I struggled with baby names when we were looking at naming our sons. We didn't know which ones were going to be sons, but and the name Judah came up, and I really liked the name Judah, but I also knew the story in the Bible, and so I was like, I just can't, because one day if my son, that I name him Judah, and then he comes and he's reading the Bible and he gets to this story about prostitutes and all sorts of terrible stuff, I don't know what I would say to him. Like, I named you after this guy. It just seemed like, I don't think I can do it. And I apologize to Judah's here. But the truth is that it's really been reconciled for me. So if we have no, that's done. Okay. So the rest of you, I give you my blessing to use this name. All Judah's failures come down to this moment. It's this moment of testing, but finally, Judah has learned to love. That's what happens. And if we go back and look at the story of Judah's redemption, we could call it, it starts with him convincing his brothers to sell Joseph, a really low point, instead of kill him, which we might say, oh, is that better? I don't know. A life of slavery or death? Questionable. Judah does that. He drives that. And then he runs away we could say from father's grief. We don't know if that's why, but he goes to live with the Canaanites. And this scandalous debacle ensues. The chapter we skip over, the one I keep talking about. Not good. And then we see a change. Something happens. He offers his own life in security for Benjamin. That's what we heard last week. Different from Reuben, the oldest brother, who says, hey, I'll give you the lives of my sons for Benjamin. Judah says, I'll give you my life for Benjamin's. And then today we see how he offers himself to take Benjamin's place in slavery. And if you kept reading the story, when you get to the end where Jacob's on his deathbed giving the blessing to his sons, it's Judah who gets the blessing of kingship and a scepter that won't leave the family. Judah has come to love his father. I think this is what happens. This is the story he tells. If you could hear that, this is what he's thinking about, his father. He does this for his father. He gives himself in love for his father's well-being. That's why he offers himself. And he also comes to love his brother. He offers himself in place of a brother more loved than him. Benjamin, the favorite. And instead of taking the silver and abandoning him, Judah offers himself, knowing that he might not even be missed as much as Benjamin. He says, now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How could I go back to my father? That's what he says. This story is the first instance of human substitution in the Bible, where one person gives themselves for another. John 15:13 is where Jesus describes this. He says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And so we would say Judah has finally learned to love. He becomes the redeemer. He buys Benjamin's life from slavery, and he does that by offering his own life in exchange. And this is what love does. It changes us. One commentator, Bruce Waltke, says, Judah's love excels. And then he says this, he is worthy of kingship. This is the change. He's finally learned sacrificial love. And so Perez will be a father to Hezron, and Hezron to Ram, and Ram to Amminadab, and Amminadab to Nahshon, and Boaz to Obed, to Jesse, to David, whose throne will never end. Learn to love. And the last challenge is that we would receive redemption. Judah becomes a kind of kinsman redeemer. He acts the part for them. For Benjamin, he's the redeemer. He's the one who comes and gives in exchange. But we also know that in passing the test of love, that Judah is redeemed himself in a way. It's interesting that years later, or not years later, a little while later, Jacob will hear that Joseph is alive. So if we keep reading the story, and Jacob is going to travel to meet Joseph, and he's traveling with everybody, and they come to Egypt, and when they get to the edge of Egypt, they send one of the brothers to Joseph to tell him, Dad's here, where do we bring everybody? Where's Goshen, where we're supposed to settle? And it could just say one of the brothers went and told Joseph, but it doesn't. It says, Judah. Judah's the one who goes and tells Joseph, Father's here. Judah, the one who sold him into slavery, reunites them. Redemption. It's beautiful. 1 John 3 says, anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And so we see Judah moving from hatred to love in this description, from murder to resurrection. Joseph is alive. Now, of course, it's grace that he doesn't need to be a slave at all, is what's crazy. That's what we find out next week. This was all a test. He doesn't need to be a slave. He doesn't need to give his life in exchange. He's also free. There's a lot of stories that point to something else, to someone else that's coming. And I don't know if blind at the end of Grandpa Isaac, who's in the family tree, ever told the story of the ram in the thicket. Maybe he gathered the boys. Hey, boys, come here. These brothers were his grandsons. I wonder if he ever gathered them around him and told them the story of the ram, the one where the father and son went up the mountain to worship. But the boy is then bound and placed upon the altar, and the knife is raised in Father Abraham's hand. And then the voice shouts, stop, no. Now I know you fear God. And the ram is brought from the thicket, caught there, and placed on the altar. And father and son worship together. The ram that took Isaac's place. I wonder if it was Amminadab or his son Nahshon who would kill a spotless lamb and smear the blood on the doorposts of their Goshen home. Was there fear when they heard that all the firstborns would die? And then this meal of unleavened bread and a cup of wine, and they would eat the lamb's meat, its blood smeared on the lintel and doorposts. And then death would pass over. The lamb that took Nahshon's place, literally. And these stories, these signs point to Jesus. We know this. Biblical redemption is defined as the act of being rescued, ransomed, or bought back from bondage, sin, or spiritual death. And over and over and over, the scriptures declare it's Jesus. Jesus is the one it's pointing to. Mark 10, verse 45, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Or 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Or Galatians 3:13, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Or 1 John 4:10, this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. Now, we know this is just one picture of our redemption. There's lots of different pictures, but this is one, loving substitution. Jesus offers himself for us, and this changes everything. You're no longer a slave to sin. Paul says over and over, you were bought at a price. Why would you do that? You were bought at a price. Why would you do this? You were bought with the blood of Jesus. Your life should change. It should look different because of this. And I look at Judah and I think, if this could be Judah's story, then why not me? What's the limit of God's redeeming power to take your story and make it a good one? And the lion is a lamb. We get to the end of everything in the Bible anyway, Revelation. John is in this vision. And he's there, and it gets to this climactic moment where the scroll, it's all about the scroll, and if someone could open the scroll, there'd be the victory. And they find no one is able to open the scroll. And it says in Revelation 5, John says, I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. And then I saw a lamb, not a lion, which is kind of weird. Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. And then there's a part where the elders fall down in worship. And this is what they say. You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals because you were slain. And with your blood, you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You've made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. And then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. And they encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. And in a loud voice, they were saying, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. The Lion of Judah has triumphed. The Lamb who was slain has redeemed us. The lion is a lamb, the worthy one who purchased us and made us to be a kingdom and priests. In conclusion, we've been bought out of slavery to live lives of love. Maybe you're saying, this was a story about Joseph. I thought, wasn't this a Joseph story? What is happening right now? Yes, but what about Judah? Because this is also a story about Judah, whose life is transformed. He's finally learned to love, and he'll offer himself to redeem Benjamin and find that grace meets him in that moment and sets him free. So you should admit your guilt. Some of you live in guilt and shame under the weight of it, burdened by the weight of our failures, and you could be enslaved for years. But the invitation is to come and confess and be free. And the challenge is to learn to love. Like Judah, the journey is that we would learn to love, to move from our selfish pride to selfless sacrifice, And in love, we become the people we were made to be. And the last challenge is to receive his redemption. Maybe today is the day for you that you will respond to him and receive his grace, to let go and receive this gift that Jesus gave himself for you. He bought us with his blood. And now he's worthy to open the scroll, the Lion of Judah, the Lamb who is slain, who has made us into a people who will be a kingdom. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for this story. It feels like it's easy to overlook in the midst of this other story that we often get caught up in the morality of, that we should be like Joseph. But maybe we're a lot more like Judah. And we need you to come and redeem our story. And so, Lord, today we come and we just acknowledge, if our hearts are ready, we acknowledge our deep need for you. That we've made a mess of things, and we need you to come and transform us, utterly transform us. We thank you that your grace does that. It changes us. It makes us into people of love, and we see that in this story. Lord, would you make us into a people of love, who love one another and who love their neighbors and the people around them. Lord, transform us. And we know this happens because of redemption, because of your power to redeem us, that you died on the cross and you rose again, and your blood was shed to buy us back out of slavery and to set us free, to call us sons and daughters, and to make us something we could never be, a people called by your name. So Jesus, this morning, we choose to respond to you. We thank you for all that you've done and are doing. Amen.